That said, the states still need a lot more money and a lot more focus, right? They did a good job of kind of going state to state, seeing if the states need anything, answering their questions, trying to prioritize and triage solutions for them. But the states still, if you talk to the states, they say, yeah, that's still only like 1/3 of our problems, right?
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
The Cybersecurity Collaborative, in conjunction with Cyber Reason, is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC.
So I'm joined today by Ari Schwartz, my good and longtime friend and sometime colleague. Ari, welcome to the program.
Pleasure to be here, Sam.
So listeners may not realize that I'm a trustee for your cybersecurity coalition in the center that it is based in. And the Cyber Reason are in fact members, active members, I like to think. And I used to attend the regular sessions, but I haven't been recently. And so maybe you could start with what the coalition's all about, and then maybe dive into what some of the topical things are. And maybe after that, we'll go into what's going on, right now, especially in the wake of COVID-19 and work from home and the elections. So take it away. Tell us about the Cybersecurity Coalitions and let the listeners.
Sure. So the Cybersecurity Coalition was started about 5.5 years ago. And really, the goal of the coalition is to bring together the experts who do cybersecurity, right? In particular, those that sell cybersecurity tools and services. There have been attempts to build cybersecurity trade associations in the past, and a lot of them have focused on pure play cybersecurity companies, and they've all fallen apart because cybersecurity companies get bought. And so what we try to do is to bring together both the pure play cybersecurity companies as well as the cybersecurity companies that are parts of or cybersecurity divisions within large tech companies as well. And so we have a good mix of those two different kinds of groups. We have about 16 members right now. We're growing. We have a few new members joining us right now. And I think we're really looking forward to 2021 as being a big year for us to move forward on a lot of issues. In terms of what issues we're tackling right now, I mean, we've traditionally focused on issues like vulnerability disclosure policy, which remains a big one. When researchers find a vulnerability, how do they go about disclosing it to companies? What should companies do with it on their side? The vulnerability disclosure, how do they get out, build patches, et cetera? That's been a big issue for us, both from the government side and within companies. IoT policy and botnets, another one. Certifications around cybersecurity is a big one. Workforce issues is something that's been kind of bubbling up a little bit. In the last few months, I think we've spent a lot more time trying to figure out how a lot of the work from home issues related to the pandemic have changed cybersecurity and what that means and what the policy should be to address that. And one thing that we've really found, so we did a lot of webinars, because we're not doing in-person events, but we moved to webinars, and we try to focus it around those issues. So we did some on issues related to healthcare, related to schools, related to other kind of work from home, just general work from home issues. And one thing we've really found is that the states are in a bad position because they're losing tax revenue. At the same time, their employees and the students that they fund in terms of education and healthcare that they fund from the state level, et cetera, has more demands because more of it's being done remotely. And so you have a different kind of tension there, where we have to look at a lot of these issues, the security issues related to work from home, and at the same time have less money to do so. So one thing that we have focused on, and I think we're going to focus on into next year, is changing the policy around E-rate reimbursement. So this is policy at the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, that allows schools to get reimbursed for networking equipment. But right now, the security piece, they can only get reimbursed for firewalls. That's it, which is totally outdated, as you know. I mean, it's somewhat insane in terms of the current.
Is that just because of old legislation, or because it hasn't really been significant until COVID forced us all to go home?
There has been a debate as to whether it should be focused only on networking or broader than networking, right? So so the people that were focused only on networking, when the issue of security came up, they said, well, we can focus on security around the network. And so a firewall clearly falls into that category. There might be some other stuff that falls in that category, but the FCC never approved it. And I think rather than saying, oh, well, we should find all the stuff that falls into the networking category, we said, no, groups like ours and many of the companies involved have said, no, don't think about it that way. If you're talking about remote school, you need to secure remote school and give schools the ability, remote education, and give schools the ability to help to secure that, not focus on, is it networking or is it not networking? Focus on whether it's security. You're not talking about paying more money out. You're just talking about putting the money that comes already from our regular phone bills and other kinds of regulated bills, right? That money's already going into a pot. It's just saying that more of that can go to security if the school needs to use it for security.
Yeah, I mean, there are availability and IT general issues around this, right? I mean, certainly my daughter's school, I'm sure it's happened elsewhere. First day of school, all the teachers were in the classrooms and the students were at home, and the Wi-Fi couldn't handle it, right? But that also opens it up to DDoS potential, right? If you're using up more of the pipe, then it doesn't take as much to knock over a school. But that doesn't even start to get into the confidentiality and integrity issues, because we literally don't have the perimeter of the school building anymore. Is this resonating?
We have seen DDoS attacks. We have seen ransomware attacks, both on schools and hospitals, for that matter. So I think and
hospitals. Really, I mean, the bad guys seem to focus on the DDoS as a service and ransomware, and crank up the fines and target because they know they'll pay. But it seems like hospitals got turned to 11 on the dial for spinal tap preference, and now they're going to 12 and they're going to 13. We even saw the FBI and HHS have over a weekend said, hey, hospitals are going to get targeted. And then there was a rash of targeting of hospitals. It's a little different, though. The sources of funding for hospitals vary much more. But is it a similar issue? The money has to come from somewhere, right?
It's a little bit different in that there is this pool of money and it's just not being used correctly. So whereas hospital, it's when you're talking about public hospitals, right, there needs to be an influx of money toward this issue for them. So that would have to come more from one of the COVID relief packages, right? There's talk of a new COVID relief package, probably will float into early 2021. That. But, if that happens, then
it might be a bit speculative here, but everyone in our industry seems to talk about the new normal, that we've had a catalyst for connectivity. Do you feel in these two sectors, in health less so, but in school, do you feel that things would bounce back to normal because of issues like this? People would say, hey, we're not really ready to go to even a significant portion of the program being at home. Like, we can't sustain this for more than a certain amount of time. Is the new normal going back to the old when all this passes, or is there a period after which?
I think things will go back to the old, but then again, was funding firewalls the only right thing to be funding in the first place, right? I mean, there were members of the Federal Trade Commissioners that had raised this issue 3 or 4 years ago, before we even had any idea that there would be a pandemic. So it's not as though this is a new problem. It's just been greatly intensified in the current environment. So I think that's one of the reasons we focus on that as one of our top issues we're going to be focusing on that as one of our top issues going forward, because we can see that there is financial change, right, that's happened in this space, and it was probably not right, and the mix was probably not right in the first place. So it should be a pretty easy victory for us if we can raise it to a top tier issue for the FCC.
Speaking of the future, we can't look in either the macroeconomic or the biological crystal balls and tell much more about what's going to happen. But going into the end of the year, do you see anything that should be the new focus? We had the cyberspace solarium report come out that it had a small impact, but we potentially are looking at a new government. We might have a renewed interest in cybersecurity. Is the Cybersecurity Coalition going to change any of what it's looking at next year? I know you have to ask the members what they want to focus on, but do you see new demands or new directions that could become more important?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think so. One thing is, we hear a lot about Section 230 and the impact on social media for 230. One thing I've been hearing for a lot from the members is there's concern about how 230, the changes in 230 might affect security companies. There have been at least 2 or 3 cases where security companies have used the protections of 230 to say, we're going to remove this piece of software because we think it harms you, and we're good Samaritans for doing that, and that therefore we're covered by 230. And the courts have stood behind them. So if you got rid of 230 wholesale and didn't replace it with anything for security, it could actually affect the way security vendors make decisions for consumers.
I think that's going to be a big one in the new year.
Yeah, I think most people would be totally fine giving like actual security companies some protection, right? That's not what they're talking about. But if people don't know that exists, that there's no one out there lobbying on behalf of the cybersecurity community on that front, then they're not. Congress is not going to know. So we may step that up as an issue for us, since 230 is coming up, expected to come up in the new Congress.
And any other topics that are sort of the next topics on the list? I know that there's always triage, and you're always focusing on the top ones. Or other things, candidates for in the identity space, or anything else that's happening in policy at the moment, or is it too soon to tell, given that this is an election?
I think we have to see what's going on. I mean, obviously, the Solarium Commission, I think, does give a very good grounding for a new administration coming in. So that is the basis for the Biden administration to kind of move forward on a lot of different areas, is what the Solarium Commission laid out. And the Solarium Commission, we've spoken to them a bunch of times. I think you've even been on some of these discussions. And their view is like that they didn't really come up with brand new things. They were taking from 20 or 30 other proposals that have been out there and just try to get the greatest hits together and put them all in one place and get 4 members of Congress behind it. Right. So I think they did a great job with that.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, totally bipartisan. They have a lot of support for it. Now. Are they things that everyone supports? No, a lot of them are not things that everyone supports, but the fact that you do have this realm of support for them, and, maybe, there's a bunch of things in there that everyone does support, and there's a bunch of things that aren't that controversial. And there are a few things that are controversial, but now that they've got more attention, maybe we can come up with a more consensus view on how to make them work in a way that's less controversial. So I think that there's a lot of good things that could come out of that report, and to focus on it with the new administration and the new Congress.
Do you think there's also some potentially lessons learned from the recent election that the new government should be thinking about? Do you think that, the Obama administration certainly had a focus and really got things going. The Trump administration did things a little differently. Do you think the next government?
Now, let me give some credit. So CISO, which is the cybersecurity division of the DHS, is run by this guy Chris Krebs, and he actually moved it from. He pushed for the legislation to kind of pull it out of the group that it was in before, and now it's on its own as a cybersecurity unit. And he did a great job in terms of working with the states and continually shooting down disinformation, even that some things from within the government he shot down coming from DHS, which is pretty brave. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for successfully navigating that through the election. And he's a political appointee, so he's a Trump appointee, and he's did a great job. Coming from an former Obama official, I'll say he did a great job on that front, and I think it's something to be emulated in the future. But that said, the states still need a lot more money and a lot more focus, right? They did a good job of kind of going state to state, seeing if the states need anything, answering their questions, trying to prioritize and triage solutions for them. But the states still, if you talk to the states, they say, yeah, that's still only like 1/3 of our problems, right? The states just don't have, and you see it in the counting, right? Like the whole why is counting taking so long? Well, they don't have any equipment, right? They don't have equipment. They don't have people, right? So how are they going to secure that, right? How are they going to build security into it if they don't have the equipment and the people? We did the best we could, considering knowing what the threats were, using risk management, bringing in third parties to help to secure that the best we can. But over time, if we're going to look at more advanced threats, they're going to need a lot more money.
I remember, so our friendship goes back nearly 20 years. And I remember asking when you were in the public sector, I'm in the private sector. I get to see my projects happen and have ownership of them. And I said, I don't know if you remember this conversation. I hope this isn't too much of a curveball. I said, how do you keep your mind in the public sector? And you gave me a really cool answer. You said, you have to be in it for the right reason. You have to have things you're trying to accomplish and be able to have discussions with people to achieve those things. And it's ultimately not about credit. It's about public service. And that really stuck with me. And I've always had a sense that you have a mission. And so hopefully, as I said, this isn't too much of a curveball. Do you have a mission today? Are you in between missions or going into 2021? Are there things you hope to accomplish?
I would say that, giving people, just going back to that point, giving other people credit in Washington makes it so you can accomplish pretty much everything. If you're out there, you feel like you need to take the credit for it. You're the only one that needs to, and you did all the work on it, so you deserve the credit. You're not going to get very much done.
It's pretty lonely.
Right? You might get some things done, people might think you're totally great for a little while, but over time, you're not going to get all the things to accomplish that you could have gotten accomplished if you were willing to give other people credit for even things ideas you came up with. So I think that still remains a philosophy for me, and I know it's a lot of other people in Washington too, that it's fine for other people to get credit as long as the thing I'm interested in gets done. So going back to the vulnerability disclosure discussion, one thing I'd still like to see, and I'm disappointed that didn't happen, was we made a lot of progress on government vulnerability disclosure in the last 4 years. So the Obama administration, going back, so the Bush administration created this vulnerabilities equities process, which is the idea was that it would, the government would kind of work out a vulnerability when it found it, and whether other people in the government had that same vulnerability, and whether it was something that was worth keeping for some purpose or giving to the company to fix, right? And in the Obama administration, it changed its policy to push toward the side of fixing it.
Uh-huh. And it was controversial, right? Who has that and who's using it?
Yeah, it was already pretty much leaning in that direction, but I think the Obama administration pushed it more in that direction and moved it that way. I'll say NSA's position has always been, NSA had the first vulnerabilities equities process, and their position at that time was we're going to lean towards sharing it if we can. And then when they built the bigger one, they were the secretariat for it. So then they were always for sharing it if they could. And then the Obama administration made it so that it should be the policy for the whole government, and leaned even further in that direction. And then when the Trump administration came in and made it public that this thing exists as well, it's another thing that they did after the Snowden leaks. And then when the Trump administration came in, Rob Joyce was the first cybersecurity administrator who came from NSA and helped set up the first one. And he made a public charter for it that made a lot more sense to the public, made this whole thing make a lot more sense to the public. And it was based a lot on some of the things that our group, the Cybersecurity Coalition, put forward, and some ideas that we put forward. And he took some of those, didn't take all of them. One thing he said was that the results, so how many, the results in aggregate of what the VEP does could be made public, right? They will give it to Congress and it could be made public, and they've never made it public this whole time. Rob Joyce was sent back to NSA and no one has ever made this public. So I would like to start to see in the new administration, and either Congress or the administration, someone start making the unclassified portions of this public. It's extremely important, I think, for people to understand and trust the workings of government, to know that if there's a policy in place that's supposed to bring transparency into what government does with vulnerability, that it actually ends up happening. So that's one thing that I think I'm going to continue to work for. And I know the coalition's 100% behind me in that regard. And it doesn't have to be everything. We're not talking about like making the individual vulnerabilities public. We're talking about in aggregate, how many of them are shared, what percentage are doing that, and setting up some standards, some baseline for that so that we can see how that changes over time. Because people are saying now, I hear some people internally or former NSAers say, oh, but that standard changes. You could shove 100 vulnerabilities and call it one vulnerability, et cetera. Well, if you come up with some kind of baseline and you set it at that, and then you go from that over time, we can see. But you got to start at some point. If you don't start somewhere, then we're never going to get to the point of understanding what's going on. So I just want to see it started. Maybe some kind of unclassified information get out there. Let people ask the questions. It's not going to be perfect the first time. Everyone will know that. Move on from there.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic messages. Transparency. It's not about the credit. It's about the result. Get started in incremental improvement. And Ari, as always, absolute pleasure to have you and have you on. And thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam. It's been great to do this.
Cybereason reverses the adversary advantage with future-ready enterprise protection that empowers defenders to end attacks instantly on endpoints, mobile devices, and in the cloud. Cybereason provides the industry's top-rated endpoint detection and response, next-gen antivirus, and proactive threat hunting to deliver full visibility into every malicious operation and one-click remediation. Cybereason ends cyber attacks from endpoints to everywhere. Learn more about cybereason.com/CISO stories.